Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. And I just want to do a real quick video on what's happening with the price of gold and why I'm a little uncertain of gold's direction, at least in the short and medium term, and why I would maintain a neutral position on gold. I don't necessarily see it as a buy or sell in the short term, although keeping in mind my clients and I have maintained a 10% allocation to the physical metal with a little bit of silver, platinum, and palladium mixed in with a particular fund that we buy. Again, not investment advice, just letting you know what my clients and I are doing. So let me show you why the draws are a little bit it's a little bit hard to tell where to draw gold at the moment. So firstly, you could say, well, this is a bullish pattern potentially because you've got the flagpole and you've got somewhat of a bullish flag forming there. But then when you look at that draw, you say, okay, well, where do I draw this? Do I draw this as you could draw that as a double top, not a flag, if you ignore on the daily chart at least, if you ignore the spike and you draw something like that, well, that looks pretty ugly. That's not necessarily a bullish looking pattern. And you could say well, one of the things you could suggest there is that it's a double top. So the support to confirm the break of the double top would be the previous high around the 2nd and 3rd of April. You draw it across there and say, there's the key level there, the support level, double top formed, and you'd say, well, that's a breakdown. So that would indicate that the price of gold, at least in the short term, was going to come back to this support level here, which would be around the $3,000 level. That would make a lot of sense to test that. I've talked before in many videos about these key previous price levels, and $3,000 is very much a psychological price barrier as well. And then you could potentially draw an uptrend. You could say, well, gold's in an uptrend. Have a look at that. Look at that uptrend. Oh, it's back on the uptrend. Maybe I should be buying it for the return move. And that's a valid case. I would suggest that these angled trend lines are not as important as key previous price levels, or what I sometimes refer to as magnet levels. But this is certainly a valid draw. You'd also say, look, there's negative divergence that helped us with the double top. You can see negative divergence there on the RSI was a little bit more pronounced. Double top there, negative divergence forming on the RSI sooner, letting you know that that all-time high around the 3,500 or 3,400 level, if you got out there, that was a sell. And then again, I don't like this angled trend line because what about these lows down here? Do you include them in the trend? So you can see why there's a little bit of indecision at the moment in gold. We don't quite know where to draw the lines. You could draw a bullish case, you could draw a bearish case, certainly on the daily chart. So that's an indication that we should probably, if we can't find a clear draw on the chart, we should probably take the data into account and say, let's be neutral on gold. It's not necessarily a buy or a sell in the short term. Exercise caution. And then if you go to a 5-year weekly chart, of course, it's been in quite a raging uptrend. I've talked to a few people on social media who are shorting gold, and I've said I just made the case that it's neutral and that it could potentially sell off further, but it's in a long-term uptrend and the trend is your friend. I don't think shorting gold as a trade is a good idea either. Again, not investment advice. You do what's appropriate for you. And the other thing I would say too is let's have a look at the US dollar chart and we'll see once it loads, my apologies. Of course, it would load slow during a live video. I've left some draws on there, but you can see a little bit of indecision in the US dollar because this 100 level is very key. You can see that was a major low in September last year. And if we draw that line across there, now I've drawn these before on previous charts. Obviously this was a sell. You've got the rising wedge pattern. You've got the negative divergence on the momentum indicators. Classic sell signal, just keeping it simple. That was quite a sharp rally through that time period. And then of course you had the breakdown from these key levels here, the breakdown, the return to a little bit of a return to the senior prime. But you can see if we go to a 5-year chart, and let me just clean that up there. You can see this 100 level is pretty key. Right? It was a major low. Well, it was sort of a low through 2023. Didn't quite get there. Then in July 2023, got there. December 2023, and August, September 2024, and we're there again. So as talked about in previous videos, we probably want to be cautious of a US dollar rally if it got to this level. This time it broke below slightly. If we just delete those, oh, there we go. Let's just wanted to delete that little. You can see that the weekly candle is kind of bouncing from that level. But if we look on the daily chart, when we zoom in, we can see that, let me just, don't want to have that up on it. I want to exit replay mode. Yes, sorry about that. Clicked on the wrong thing. course, it'll have to load for us again now. You can see on the daily chart, that 100 level, that looks like a breakdown. So there are a lot of people a few weeks ago saying, "Oh, look, it's broken down. It's broken down." You can see there's a lot of consolidation around that level, a lot of testing of the 100 level. And again, generally a rising US dollar would be bad for gold. Gold is priced in US dollars, or the gold chart we were looking at certainly, and generally the dollar going up would not necessarily be a good thing for gold, but it has recaptured that level now. If we just clean that again, draw that line across, you can see that was definitely a key level. And then at the last few days, it's broken out above. It's a little candle wick there, bouncing off that 100 level. And if you draw the downtrend, if you want to draw it there again, I don't necessarily like these angled trend lines as much, but if you draw it from that level there, you might make a case that it's broken the first sort of downtrend bit. Not positive divergence on the MACD, little bit on the RSI, so maybe it needs another test, but there is, again, indecision on the US dollar chart, indecision on the gold chart. So when we can draw a few different scenarios like that, and you can always draw a few different scenarios if you really stretch things, but quite often, like for example, when I showed the sell signals on the US dollar, it was a little bit more clear that the uptrend was losing momentum, whereas now it's not so clear. So we're a little bit unclear on US dollar, a little unclear on gold. So that's why we should be neutral. Look at the charts, try to look at them without a bias. And we can see that there's multiple cases can be made. So continue to be neutral and wait until the charts give you a more clear signal. There's always another day to trade and manage risk as well. That's a lot of what I try and do for my clients and I. Is not so much we're not taking trades, we're managing risk. So because the US dollar has had a big sell-off, and again, I can't give advice in this video, but for many of my clients, I have bought a strong US dollar fund, roughly 5% allocation, maybe a little lower for clients that have bigger portfolios. And again, it's not because I'm taking a trade that I think the US dollar is definitely going up. It's that the US dollar has come down significantly. It's at a level where it's bounced at before. We saw that on the 5-year chart. So, and generally a rising US dollar is negative for most other major asset classes, whether it be stocks, listed real estate, gold, other commodities. So I'm not buying the US dollar for a trade. I'm buying it for clients as a hedge in case we do see a US dollar recovery. And of course, we continue to hold roughly 10% of our portfolios in physical precious metals, primarily gold. I hope that gives you a good little charting update. Thanks very much for listening. Have a great weekend, and be back with another video soon. Cheers.